Well, this is a picture from 60,000 feet, a reconnaissance photograph that's slightly blurred and should not be blurred. And I don't know why it was sent out as this, but they surely have, at that height, much better photographs than this. But it was something that shows the colors because of exactly the sun's position. So it's a beautiful photograph of Wyoming, and this is Devil's Tower up here in the top left-hand corner. And the sun would be just to your right and a little bit below the aircraft, giving a straight reflection off of the canyon areas. And you can see how the canyon areas here are all made out of the red soil, and it has the tan tops on top of them. There's more of a sandstone, sand built in, more of a deserty type of sand packed into the stone that comes down into a more iron oxide red. It's real reminiscent of like the Grand Canyon area. In fact, a picture that I might show you in a second has it. But another feature over here is this. And this is the released photograph that's here. And it's somewhat cropped. And of course, you're zoomed in. And that's why it's blurry. And also down here, you can see the river that runs through here and around and over the edge. And it's believed that due to the eruption of this volcano in primordial time, it made this huge mound that's here, which would make no sense because volcanoes that erupt, the rock that this is made out of, would not be sandstone. Right. Nor would it be the iron oxide that's here. And so that leaves one to think differently about how geography works in this area. But strangely, the river there runs down, and then it has to make this little dip at the bottom. And whenever it does, it's because of that bulge that comes out in the land. And so water takes a path, and it carries on through the edge. And over here on the edge of the canyon over on the right-hand side. But that ring that's over in the bottom left is kind of odd and telltale. And then, of course, the Devil's Tower sticks out, the Devil's Tower. But the geographical features, they show you things sometimes that make you, it's one of those things where you can't see the trees for the forest, but once you get up to a height, you can see things. Whenever you're on the ground and you're in Yellowstone National Park, you have no idea that you're in a giant caldera of a volcano that's so huge that you can't see the tree for the forest again. And here we're looking at that effect. So the original photograph is like this. And I don't know if I can get all this in there. Let me zoom into parts of it. So here's even a cropping, by the way. This is original cropping, A, if you will. And in this photograph, you can really see the veining in that mountain edge that's coming down. And of course, there's the modern road that's cut through there. But that's not the photo. Hello. Yaha. Here's your photo. Now here's a better photo of the exact same thing. I try to have the contrast off just a little bit. I know it may look a little hazy, but then it's not just so dark, and it doesn't make these individual trees start to look like some black, weird thing here. But strangely, as they've cut through here, this seems to be somewhat of dark soil here, okay? And if you'll look right here, there's a gradient to this land. It's little lines. I'm sure it picks it up. But these little lines that are right here are stepping that's running through here. And it seems to be primordial. It doesn't seem, it's not new terracing of farmland. And the primordial river goes around it. But you can see how the river just cuts through there and runs all up. But one thing that you can see in this photo too is that there's a perfect kind of ring that's right here that runs around, and you can see the trees are in that bulge of it. And it looks like there's just a, I'm sitting in the middle of a little crater right here, or a bulge. And the river has to run around it, right? So down here is a little dog-eared place. Well, this is just this sticking out, and water has to find a way, and so it finds a way. But in this photograph, again, the sun is off to your right, so it's leaving that shadow behind it right there. And just an odd telltale kind of sign type of thing here, that there's actually a ring right here, and then there's another ring that's right here. You see this, right? And there's a hint of a large ring that's right here that I would be in the center of, if you can catch that. Here's the perimeter. You can see the line of where it goes around. I can't actually control this as well as I'd like, but I've gone around the perimeter somewhat there. So it looks like there's some type of maybe, crater from a strike, or is this a giant or volcano from a long, long time ago? Well, the odd thing is that the bottom of this slopes out and says that the bubble effect would have been way up on its body up to here instead of down. Let's look at a closer photograph, and I'll give you a better idea of what I'm alluding to and looking at, and I'll tell you some folklore of the area. Okay, looking at it in daylight and stuff, you can see the tower effect here, but also one thing that a lot of people don't look at close, if they don't look at this closely, is that it's all made of these little pillars, which is a strange effect, but it's actually a volcanic effect, they say, that's the same as the volcano that makes up what is in the British Isles, the Causeway of the Giants. It's that same hexagonal, pentagonal shaped pillars that are all in there, and this is all made of it. I'll show you a picture as we get closer in here, but this effect here, if you'll look, it starts to go out. These pillars bend. They come here and they bend. You can clearly see this. And so that led a few of the Indian tribes that are around here to say that this is an old tree stump from a world tree that used to reach all the way up into heaven. And there's two different tribes that are nomadic through this area that say that same effect. The other ones say it was a giant hill that was sacred. All three of them say it's sacred. There's another tale that the Indians climbed this thing in primordial times to get away from a giant bear. Now, in this land here of America, there were giant cave bears. And a giant cave bear is 1.5 times the size, which in your mind you just think it's a little taller, but it's not. It's huge. These giant cave bears that we used to have here, but that they had gone on top of this mountain and they had fought it off. And so it's an old primordial story, but it also has to do with the zodiac and Ursa Minor and the bear that's there. And oddly enough, we have the same bear, both bears, and they have both bears, Ursa Minor and Major. They had in the same thing, and it had to do with the tail that's here at the Devil's Tower. And I don't know how old you are, but you may have seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's got Richard Dreyfuss, and he freaks out, starts making mashed potato mounds that look like this, and in his kid's sandbox, and then on his table, and all kinds of stuff, and he becomes like a UFO freak out of the 1970s. And he gets so freaked out about it that he gets drawn to this place, and he, in the process, they have a couple of close encounters with him. The one in the truck is all famous, where he's out there and the light comes down on him and the signs all shake and things. And it's one of those Spielberg things where it gets you hear the shark, and then it gets closer and closer, and no, and then it happens. And of course, and so here at the Devil's Tower was where it all culminated, and the spaceship came and landed on top of it in this special facility that they had already made, and all these type of things, because they had the government had already been in contact with him, and then he ends up going with them. But the oddity here, people, is that this volcano wouldn't have this bent pillar effect, and it's an oddity. It's definitely an oddity. They have a lot of these volcano effects. This one here is much larger of pillars than you see in any of the other effects. In fact, the Giant's Causeway you can hop around on. Each one of these pillar pieces here is, between 8 and 30 feet across, and stuff. And there's very few eights at all. Really, in fact, the eights are actually hyper separated 32s. And so let's look at that fact. Let me change to an even closer view. Okay, so here we are looking up the face of the mountain next to a tree, and we are some 80 feet away from the edge of it. It doesn't show in perspective. It's really not caught in perspective as to how big these things are until you find out that right there at the tip of that is a mountain climber. And right there at the tip of that is a mountain climber. And that these pillars are just huge and incredible slabs of rock that you can tell here. And they keep flaking off. And over time they flaked away. But long ago, the outside of the volcano that would be in our common mind of where, Mauna Loa and things like that volcano has that sloped edge up would be this. Would This is the heart of it, and then the outside would be a shell that would be much more convex and covered with a lot of soil and things like that. And of course, you look at them and they're burping up a lot of volcanic matter. But like Mount St. Helens really is not this shape in any way, shape, or form. In fact, this is just the guts or the center of a volcano that's left. It was huge and an incredible thing that happened in primordial times. But you can see how big these slabs are and how they flake and crack off and fall and create a pretty much a pre-made little hex-shaped rocks all around it. But why would it bend above the ground so far as opposed to being at ground level or under, of course? Well, if there was erosion, or are you saying that the earth must have been way up to here, hundreds and hundreds of feet taller? Or how big was the mountain that was around this, and then how did that erode away so easily in an area that's pretty much a desert now? Well, around the Ice Age, there was a lot of melt and things like that, but that wouldn't account for it a lot. It wouldn't account for enough erosion. It really wouldn't. I mean, you'd have to be in the middle of a jungle effect to have it erode away like that. And in fact, jungles don't erode away that fast if they have any vegetation around on them. So it just doesn't correlate quite well. People have studied this quite a bit. I've read a lot of things on it, but there's overlooks here that if that breaks off and you're anywhere here, doing anything, it's going to hurt somebody. It's going to hurt somebody quite a bit. But let's look at more of these pillars and get up close so I can show you how big some of them are. Now, the bigger ones they can't climb at. There are only special places that are a lot smaller than these big old pillars. I mean, this thing here is 25 foot across, and so there's no way you can get here in between these two and span that. You need smaller ones and little ones that are tucked in between ones like this that become smaller. So let's look at a closer bit. Here's somebody that's actually climbing part of what is the, I guess, east face, and or northeast face, and or is it southeast face? Southeast face. And anyhow, he's in between two of these pillars, and to show you how, you know, conforming they are, the guy can just spread his legs like this if you're tall enough, and you can step your way up this. And they're at enough angles here, it's almost like you're walking up a giant doorway that never ends, and because it's made of giant rocks. But now you can see how individually these things are cut out, just, and I say cut out, but cut out by the forces of nature whenever volcanoes are formed. But amazingly, they're all kind of hexagonal and pillarish shaped, just like those giants' causeway shapes. Every one of these little pillars is multifaceted, and they all fit together and are all formed at the same time and then crack apart just slightly, like a cellular structure, again hearkening to the idea that it's a giant tree. So let's look at something else. Let's look at the ancient Indian story. So here's a depiction of that Indian story and how the giant bear had come up and tried to attack them, and now that bear clawing at them and clawing at this thing to get up is what made the lines in it and the claw marks in their ancient ideal. So you can tell that this is way out of scale, because this becomes something like your King Kong version. Well, not even King Kong. This would be twice the size of King Kong. So, but your King Kong version of a cave bear against a people that wouldn't even show up as a dot in this picture. But this is the picture they behold of it, or what they give you as a story. But again, just like fables and a lot of folklore and tales, it actually is a zodiacal type story, and then they've got some little story to go with it, and it's supposed to give you an ideal or things to think about that becomes such a part of your life that you have intellect from it. So you have a story of how you can get up on higher ground and protect yourself even from something as bad as a giant bear or anybody that's mean. And of course, everybody used to get up on mountains and defend. It's better to have that. And what you actually have here is the Devil's Tower, and then the story of the mama bear and her baby bear that end up on the Devil's Tower, right? And they seem to be attacking it. Perhaps this story about how it goes around and around is a story about how a mama bear protects her young. So it's something that teaches you a lot of things, like don't mess with the mama bear and don't mess with her young, because mama bear big, what can she do? She can get so big she can claw up a mountain, you don't want to mess with it. So you're left with that concept. But again, here's the visual that actually is there, that it spins around and that you would see. And so this is also a story that you find in Brother Bear. If you've ever watched tell everybody I'm on my way, Brother Bear, it has a story that goes with this. Now, it's more of a northern story from here, but it contains the same bear, same mountain mythology thing that came from this ideal here, showing you that they had the same spreaded concept. I'll show you another interesting picture. It's a neat picture. Here is the Devil's Tower in the distance and the Milky Way cascading through the night. And in this, it's a time-lapse photography that was taken. And so it really shows off the stars real well and the glow of the Milky Way. And again, this is also the sky goddess of Egypt that's holding up the sky that you see, that's the stars, that she's arched over, and here's her arms coming down in her hands, and here's her head, and here's her midsection that she could be pregnant in, and here's her butt and her legs, and she comes down like that. This is what they depict, but it's a neat shot. And also in this shot you can see that there's a little asteroid that came in, a shooting star, a little piece that just streak and cut through and made a little line while the time-lapse photography was done. So easy and good pick that you have here. Another weird effect to this time-lapse, I believe that what they've caught right there is a galaxy in the distance. You can see it here. There's a star cluster that's up here if it shows in the photograph. So a lot of time-lapse things will show you stuff, but you have to time it just right or everything becomes a blur. You know, because you let it start spinning. And so something that happens faster than the collection data that you're doing. So what you have to do is take a whole bunch of photos and then put them together and enhance it together and get one exact photo out of it. And in our modern photography, we can do this. And it basically just enhances the whole idea where you can even see the thermal cloud layer on a cloudless night that runs off into the distance where the actual sunset is. Let's look at another photo. Really? I know it's already here. And I couldn't have missed it because it's pretty dramatic. That's odd. So here's one of the original shots from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. No, this is actually somebody recreating what the Arizona lights and what's been seen 4 or 5 times by different people going over the top of it would look like. But it's just been synthesized. It's a CGI somebody did. But let's look at Close Encounters. So here's Close Encounters and the depiction of the giant mothership that came up and flipped around. And if you remember, it flipped over and all the little iron rods and things and stuff and all the little LEDs were at the end of it because they could finally use the little fiber optic little lights on the end of it to make it look like it, even though this thing was only about 3 or 4 times the size of a basketball, and flip it around and make it look like somehow it had come up and landed. But the oddity here was that in the shots of the movie, it made it seem like the man had climbed up all the way to the top and got up to here somehow, and that somehow in a crevice up in the top of this was where this setup was. Whenever I actually find out the setup here is way down here, it's not even on top of the mountain, but he didn't climb up. You know, that continuity's not really there. It was anyhow, but so the base is here. So when it comes up and it lands, you know, and then it starts talking to people, you know, doom, 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 boom, 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 and there's a whole little interaction and stuff. One of the neat little parts of the movie, but Yeah, Devil's Tower. Some oddities are there with it, definitely. And it never really was called the Devil's Tower by anybody until modern times. That's something somebody else came up with. And now, today, where you would see that Close Encounters set up at the bottom is actually a little bit closer than that. Almost where the picture is now, somewhere between the two, is a place called the Trading Post. And it's a definite stop whenever all the bikers are going to Sturgis, but it's also where you come and you get to do your tours that come up to the edges of it and so on. And it's kind of tough to get a permit to climb the thing. You have to be an advanced climber to even attempt it. And then because it's such a different and unique spot and the climb is unique, it becomes something that's quite unique. And indeed, the Devil's Tower is unique in the fact that its cubits and its size of its hexagons are so much larger than the other places. But each of these places also has a belief in a world tree. You know, the one that's over in Britain would have been the Yggdrasil and the world tree that's there. There's a world tree geometric effect like this that's over there at the edge of Samaria. There's a couple of them that are in Asia in a few spots. There's this one that's in Wyoming, but it sticks out like a sore thumb. And modern conspiracy people say that, you know, hey, it's a giant tree, it's a giant tree. Well, sure, there were stories that it was a giant tree, but it's not. It's a volcanic effect. But then in the fact that you know that it's supposed to be a volcanic effect, why is it that the volcano looks like that it bends out at the bottom to where the ground would have been all the way across here, that high up, or up to about here almost, and then the volcano thing would have been a slope just about the cut that I cut there before the bear chopped it all up, right? So an interesting effect though, but I'll have more on this. And one other interesting site that's out in the middle of nowhere, part of my Nowhere series, Life in the Middle of Nowhere, will be Nan Madol. And Nan Madol is a place on the island of Pompeii, which is kind of odd that it has the same sounding name as Pompeii, the ancient volcanic site that got covered and everyone trapped into in primordial time, or not primordial, but early, that shows a correlation that's there too between volcanoes, perhaps even in the naming of them, and that on Pompeii, that Nan Madol, this temple, was all made out of those little pillars, but they're a lot smaller. Of course, incredibly heavy at just at that. These pieces are almost unworkable. Yet you look at the stones of Baalbek and a lot of the big temples, and it seems like a lot of that's unworkable too. Yet it was workable. Like, share, and subscribe, guys, and more interesting videos to come. Look for the Nan Madol one that I'll start making, hopefully as soon as I can correlate the rest of the data. Thanks.